Hey, welcome back to Cool Classics. Today we're going to take a look at the life and career of Yvonne De Carlo, best known for playing Lily Munster on the Munsters TV series, but there's a lot more to her story. I got some cool clips, some freaky facts. Here we go. She was born Margaret Yvonne Middleton, September 1st, 1922, in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. Her mother, Marie De Carlo, was an aspiring actress. Now, her father, William Middleton, well, he called himself a salesman, but the family says he was a con artist. When Yvonne was just 3 years old, her father had scammed some people out of their money, and they came looking for him. So he ran away from them and his family and never returned. Now, Yvonne says that everything that she knows about her father leads her to believe that he must have died before she became famous, or he would have showed up somewhere along the line looking for money from her. After her father left, things got pretty difficult. She said her mother tried to keep the place going, so she was a waitress at a restaurant, but it just wasn't enough, and eventually we had to move in with her parents, and my grandparents were nothing like my mother. My mother, she had kind of a wild side. Not in a bad way, just in a more carefree way. She said her grandparents provided for all of their necessities, which allowed her mother to continue working and provide the extras that she wanted her daughter to have, such as enrolling her in dance and vocal lessons at 3 years old, and as she progressed, her mother enrolled her in the June Roper School of Dance, which was very prestigious. And by the time she was in junior high, she was studying dramatic acting. She says that her mother really did go out of her way to provide all of the formal training that she could, because she felt like not having that in her life really held her back in her pursuits for show business. Yvonne really enjoyed all the creativity associated with the performing arts. She started writing poetry and even won a contest in the Vancouver Sun newspaper with an entry called A Little Boy. And by the time she was 12 years old, she was writing her own plays, advertising them, and performing them in her grandparents' backyard. And if the weather turned bad, she made sure the show went on. Everybody had to go to the cellar. It was around this time that people were starting to consider her a local legend. This girl that could sing and dance and was doing her own plays, and what's going to happen with her? Everybody was just kind of like all eyes on Yvonne. Now, her mother didn't want her to just become a big fish in a small pond. She wanted her to go and try her luck in Hollywood, even though she was young. So her mother waited till school got out, and once summer vacation started, those two headed to California. Yvonne says that her first trip down there was just going to talent agencies, performing for them to see if they would like to represent her, which all of them declined. But a couple of them sent her out to auditions and said, if you get this part, we will represent you. So she got to go on a couple auditions because of that, but nothing came of it, so they went back home. Not ones to give up, Yvonne and her mother returned to Hollywood every summer throughout her high school years. Now, when they returned to Hollywood in 1940, Yvonne entered the Miss Venice Beach beauty pageant, where she placed first runner-up, and that qualified her to be entered into the Miss California contest later that year. So in my research of this contest, it looks like there are some freaky facts I need to share. First of all, Yvonne ended up placing 5th. I also found some footage of this event, and there's Yvonne right now. And when Shirley Patterson, who wins, is getting her award, you can see Yvonne to the left behind the guy for a split second. Now, after she won the event, Shirley Patterson was disqualified when they found out she was from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, and she was too young. Now, I don't know what this would have meant if Yvonne had won, because she is also from Canada and born the same year as Shirley. On a side note, Shirley went on to play Linda Page in all 15 chapters of the Batman serial from 1943. She also appeared in some movies like The Land of the Unknown and The Terror from Beyond Space. So the title of Miss California 1940 officially went to Rosemary LaPlanche, who ended up in 1941 winning Miss America. So while Yvonne was on stage at these pageants, she was noticed by this booking agent, and he said he wasn't going to sign her, but he would send her out for job openings that he heard of, and if she ever landed any, he would get a commission. So she agreed, and one of the first places he sent her was to Earl Carroll's Theater on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood. She would be auditioning for a part in the chorus line. Yvonne and her mother show up, she auditions, and Earl tells her, "That was great. Now I need to speak to you alone in my office." So her mother sits in a chair right outside the door. Yvonne walks in. No sooner than she gets 5 feet in, than he tells her she needs to take her top off. He has to personally inspect the size of her breast. And then he wants her to try on some outfits while in there. Well, it doesn't go past 5 feet, and she's already running back out the door going, Mom, he wants me to take my shirt off and touch my breast." Well, her mom jumps up out of the chair, but grabs the chair with one hand, reaches around and swings it in the door that's still open, and it flies over, hits his desk, barely misses him, and she starts yelling. She says, "My mom was super protective of me, and this was funny. She said he was a dirty, stinky pig of a man, and she could smell him as soon as she walked in there." She said, "Anytime I needed to laugh, I just remembered that scene. My mom was something else." Now, here's some freaky facts about this Earl Carroll guy. In the 1920s, during Prohibition, he threw a party for his friend Harry Kendall Thaw, who had been released from prison for murdering Stanford White, who was a home builder to the rich and famous of New York. Now, this New York high society party had everyone there, including some members of the press. Well, the centerpiece of this party was a nude bathing woman, Joyce Hawley, and she wasn't bathing in water, she was bathing in illegal liquor. Well, the Prohibition agents get wind of this, they raid the place, and they find several other illegal activities going on. So a lot of people ended up going to jail that night, but Earl ended up going to prison for 6 months. Now, when he got out, he was still very successful in New York, and he had a theater in Hollywood. But on June 17th, 1948, he died in the crash of United Airlines Flight 624. As for Joyce Hawley, her arrest led to more fame. She ended up touring the country performing in nightclubs a song and dance routine that ended with her in a bathtub full of champagne, but it was really ginger ale since Prohibition was still in effect. Unfortunately, as you can see on the screen right now, her career started to dwindle down and she had a lot of problems in her personal life. She ended up just leaving everything behind. Although Yvonne was traumatized and embarrassed by her encounter with Earl Carroll, she didn't stop pushing forward. Her and her mother went to everywhere in Hollywood that could possibly hire a showgirl, and they found work at the Florentine Gardens in Hollywood. This nightclub was a big deal at the time, and she was hired to be a backline chorus girl. After a couple of weeks of performing in the background, she was asked to play the lead in a play of Tea for Two. Now, as the show ended, the curtains came down, and the owner, Nils Granlund, took to the stage and asked the audience, "What do you think of our lead actress tonight? Is she a yes or is she a no?" Well, the audience responded with applause and cheers, and she was in. And over the next 3 months, she took over the entire show. They developed her own play based off of King Kong, and she was the Fay Wray character. And the guy in the giant gorilla suit would end up carrying her off stage. The place would erupt in applause. This was their big hit show, and Yvonne was the star. Now, this didn't settle with some of the other girls that were there before her and were upset with her taking over the spotlight. So they knew what they could do to get rid of her. That was turn her into immigration. One evening before her performance, she was arrested backstage and deported back to Canada. The owner of the Florentine Gardens was so upset by this that he contacted his lawyers, and they got a hold of immigration and they tried to work out a deal. It took a few weeks, but they came to the agreement that he would be her sponsor and guarantee her full-time work so that she could have a work visa in the United States and return. So after 1 month of being home in Canada, she was coming back. Back at the Florentine as the headline star, Yvonne was now able to find herself an agent, and that agent was able to find her a small uncredited part playing a bathing beauty in the Harvard Here I Come movie of 1941. That same year, she stars in 3 soundies. Now, soundies are 3-minute long short films that play before the main movie in the theater for the evening. Nowadays, we have previews. Back then, they had these. Here she is in her first one. It's called The Pearl of Baghdad. And here is her second one, The Lamp of Memory.
The secret light is burning, and through the lamp of memory I see you back with me again. The magic lamp of memory that lights the past for me again.
So appearing in these soundies turned out to be a good deal because one of the producers ended up working on the movie Road to Morocco with Bob Hope, Bing Crosby, and Dorothy Lamour. And when it came time to fill out the girls for the harem scenes when they had to sing and dance, he thought of Yvonne, brought her in, and she was in there uncredited, but still she was in the movie. Which turned out to be another good break because Bob Hope was putting together his USO tour in support of the troops for World War II, and he noticed Yvonne and brought her along. But before I show you that, you gotta see this camel scene from the movie. It was unplanned, it just happened on accident, and they left it in because it was just too darn funny.
It's only a kangaroo.
Yeah.
What are you getting scared for? Let's take a ride. This is probably one of the... Oh!
And now Yvonne on the USO tour of 1942.
That's all the music I have. I don't know what else I could possibly do for you, so...
When Yvonne returned home from the USO tour, she says that her mailbox began to fill up with fan letters from the service members. She would reply to as many as she could, but she said she saved every single one of them because they meant so much to her for her entire life. She was also contacted by Paramount Pictures, who had made that movie with her and Bob Hope. They offered her a developmental contract. This would pay her $60 a week and pay for her to go to acting school. So she accepted. Paramount ended up placing her in 4 movies in 1942, and in 1943 they placed her in 8 more, all uncredited. They didn't want to name brand her yet. They were waiting for her to develop her acting skills and find the right parts. Yvonne said in an interview that a lot of girls drop out of these contracts because it takes so long before you get your lead opportunity, and they just can't wait any longer. They feel like 1 year is a lifetime, but she was going to hang out until the end. There was no way she was quitting.
I drink, madame. I dance, madame. May I slap your face, madame?
Now in 1944, they placed her in 7 more uncredited movie roles. After that, Paramount ran into a string of bad luck at the box office, which put them in financial trouble. So they tried to lose every contract that they could, and of course, Yvonne was one of those. With no check coming in, Yvonne was also running into financial trouble. So in order to keep her apartment, she told her mother, who she was supporting and letting live with her, that she needed to go out and find a job too. Well, her mother didn't like this, and it became a point of contention. The two would argue a lot because her mother really didn't go out and work enough. She would just work a couple days and expect the rent to still be paid, while Yvonne was working more than that at a restaurant and still going on auditions. Now, in 1945, this production company put out a nationwide advertising campaign looking for the most beautiful woman in America to be the face of their new movie. You had to send in a resume along with photographs, and they received over 20,000 applicants. They ended up inviting the 500 most beautiful women to come in for auditions, and Yvonne was one of them. and when it was all said and done, they picked Yvonne to be the star of Salome, Where She Danced.
She's beautiful. The lady has access to the royal family in Vienna. In fact, one of the Habsburg may think more of her than he does of his emperor.
This movie did so good at the box office that Universal Pictures came in and offered her $350 a week to sign with them, but she said this time it was different. I was going to be a leading actress, which meant that I had to go to etiquette school so that I could always be seen looking my best. I was not allowed to go out of the house looking shabby or having no makeup on. I also needed to make sure that anything I was doing, it showed my good side, even if I was eating at a restaurant, because you never know what happens when the camera clicks. And that's another thing. She had to learn how to look into a camera at just the right angle so that the flashbulb wouldn't make her blink. They also sent her to school to learn how to walk in dresses and heels. Although she could do that already, they said, "Have you ever stepped off a New York curb in high heels and a dress? Well, we're about to teach you how." Now, Yvonne says that right before she had signed this contract, her mother had already decided it was too hard to work full-time and pay her share of the bills, so she had moved back home with her parents, leaving Yvonne at age 22 to be on her own at a time when she was struggling. And she says, "Here I am, I made it, but you know, I really wasn't very worldly. Although I'd been on all these movie sets and guys had came up and offered to take me out on dates, I always turned them down. I was known as the Ice Queen, and yes, I was still a virgin. So having this opportunity to work all the time and make good money, I was all in." That's when Universal decides to make her their new face of Westerns. She starred in Frontier Gal, followed by The Gal Who Took the West.
Good, isn't she?
Which member of your family did you say couldn't tell a song from a train whistle? What's the matter?
I just found out you're terrible.
Who said so? What are you trying to do? I didn't say a word. And what's the matter with my singing?
It's terrible.
You always liked it before.
I never listened to it before.
I've got a good mind to... I'd like to see you keep this crowd quiet with one of your numbers.
That's too easy. I'll do it with one of yours.
And play it in F.
He was a peaceful man, if you know what I mean. He never looked for trouble, that's a fact you can't assume. But nevertheless, when trouble would press, Calancy'd lower the boom. Whenever they'd get his Irish up, Calancy'd lower the boom, 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 boom. He's always...
The movie is a hit, and it's official. Yvonne is a star. So Universal decides they need to renegotiate their contract. They want exclusive rights for 10 years, and they offer her $100,000 per year, cash up front, $1 million. Yvonne can't believe it. She accepts, and in April of 1947, an account is created at the Bank of America in Hollywood, California. The money is transferred to her, and she is presented with a check to keep as a souvenir, which she kept in a scrapbook for her entire life.
How do you like the West?
Better and better.
What happened next is just an amazing run of 36 movies for Universal in 10 years. That's over 3 per year. She was working non-stop, and there's some good ones in there too, such as Casbah with Tony Martin and Criss with Burt Lancaster.
They're killers. I can't even sleep. Look the way he treats me.
He saw the danger signs, but he wouldn't heed them.
And how about Scarlet Angel with Rock Hudson? and Band of Angels with Clark Gable.
Tell me who you really are.
Never mind what my name was. You talk about freedom. You think I've got freedom? I got a past I'd like to forget. But I can't get away from it. Any more than you can get away from what you are. Got it.
Let's move in on a close shot here.
Oh, Roll, could you hold it a few minutes? I see we have some visitors.
Yeah, go ahead, Clark.
You are with us on stage 22 at Warner Brothers Studio in Burbank, California. Miss Yvonne De Carlo and I have just played a scene from Band of Angels. Robert Penn Warren's bestseller.
Yvonne says it was during these years that she finally started dating, and the first guy was Burt Lancaster, which she said was wonderful. But as I got more popular, different people from around the world would reach out and want to go out to dinner with me. One of which was Howard Hughes. She said the billionaire who had an airline, a movie studio, and was working with the government wanted to have dinner every night with me. Finally, about the fourth night out, I said, "Are you trying to date me so that we could get married?" And he said, "Oh no, I would never do that." And she thought, that's kind of odd, but he's kind of odd. But what's even more funny, she said, that was our last date. I never went back out with him. Another was the Prince of Iran, whose brother was the Shah of Iran. Now, the Prince was a big fan of mine. He knew all of my movies, everything that I've ever done. He actually had real copies of the movies that he could show in his palace. So I felt this was very intriguing, and it was kind of flattering. But over time, all he would ask me to do was leave it all behind and come live with him in the palace, which was something I couldn't do. In this interview I watched, she goes on to say that Robert Stack was the man that she asked out. She said he had it all in her eyes. She just couldn't get over he was tall, blonde, and just looked so good. Now, they did date for a couple of years, and if you don't know who Robert Stack is, he went on to play in the Untouchables, and then later on, Unsolved Mysteries. Then in 1955, while on the set of the movie Shotgun, she says that she noticed this stuntman, Robert Morgan, and she thought he was really good looking. And so she made it a point to talk to him a few times. And as the conversations progressed, she found out that he was married and had a daughter, so she left it alone. But just a couple years later, in Egypt, on the set of the movie The 10 Commandments, she notices the same stuntman, Robert Morgan. She goes over and starts talking to him, and she finds out that his wife had just recently died. She felt bad, she consoled him, and they started talking regularly. Before the end of the movie, they were dating. And the following year, they were married, and she adopted his daughter. Now, in the movie The 10 Commandments, Yvonne plays the character Sephora, who is the wife of Moses, and Moses is played by Charlton Heston. Now, Yvonne won 2 awards for Best Supporting Actress for this part, and I have to say, this is some of her best acting, and boy, is she stunning.
Love is not an art to us. It's life to us. We can offer you little, but we offer all we have.
You would fill the emptiness of my heart.
I could never fill all of it, Moses.
Now, it's right about this time that her contract ended with Universal, which meant she could now pick and choose her projects and the timing of them. So she structured it in such a way that over the next couple years, her and Robert started their own family together, and they had 2 sons, which now meant they had 3 children in the household, and they were happily married. This is when Yvonne decides to go into television. She wants to be close to home and not committed to a long project. So she appears on Bonanza, episode A Rose for Lotta.
But what kind of a name is that for a man? Horse.
Oh, he had some other name when he was born, but then when he weighed in at 50 pounds when he was just a couple of months old. Well,
50 pounds at a couple of months. Now, that's impossible.
I don't think you'd say that if you could have seen Horse's mother.
Isn't she your mother, too?
Who, that big gal? Oh, no.
Things continued on like this for a couple of years. Then in 1962, her husband was on the set of How the West Was Won, starring John